We've talked about the idea that there was possibly a fight that broke out on the second level of the King Roadhouse, and that was possibly what lit the fuse for the Idaho 4 crimes. But what if that fight actually started on the third level? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about an idea that was shared with me, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a very common sense theory with logical explanations of how the Idaho 4 crimes could have happened inside the King Roadhouse. Now, we know that law enforcement believes that these crimes began on the third level in Maddie's bedroom. And I think a lot of us have had questions about how did a complete stranger get into the King Roadhouse and then get up to the third level without being seen by any of the other roommates? Because we know that there were some roommates who were awake during the time of these crimes. So how did a complete stranger get into the King Roadhouse and then get up to the third level to Maddie's bedroom without being spotted by anybody? Unless they weren't a stranger at all. It's very possible that whoever went up to the third level was seen by the roommates. And maybe it wasn't, maybe they didn't think that there was anything odd about it because they knew this person or these people. And they believed that maybe they were just going upstairs to talk to Kaylee and Maddie. Maybe all of the roommates in the King Roadhouse were awake that night. We've been led to believe that everyone in the house was either sleeping or getting ready to go to bed. But what if that wasn't the case at all? What if everyone in the house was wide awake? We know that they were drinking that night. So it's very possible that maybe people were over at the house hanging out and that all of the roommates were awake. What if something happened on the third floor that set all of this in motion? What if something happened on the third floor that was a reaction to something that had happened earlier that night? It's possible that things escalated on the third floor among people who knew each other. Maddie and Kaylee would have tried to defend each other, but maybe they were overcome and their lives were taken. Maybe they were fighting on the third level rather than the idea that somebody just snuck upstairs and, it was a surprise attack on these two victims. Maybe they knew exactly what was happening. Maybe there was a fight that was happening on the third level that went way too far. And Maddie and Kaylee were overcome. And maybe that would explain why Kaylee is described as having wounds that would indicate that she was fighting. Maybe it was a fight on the third level. The multiple calls to Jack D, one right after another, in my opinion, are very important because it's an indication that Kaylee was possibly trying to smooth something over with Jack D. Maybe something was said earlier in the night, Or maybe it was something that Maddie told Adam, who was Jack D's roommate. But it seems as though with the multiple calls, one right after another, that Kaylee was really trying to get a hold of Jack to maybe fix something, maybe smooth something over. But I feel like these calls are very important because they go unanswered, and it would seem as though there's, some urgency, that Kaylee and Maddie are urgent to get a hold of Jack D. And why would that be? Why would they be so urgent to get a hold of him at 3 o'clock in the morning after they had just seen him an hour prior? Now, Kaylee said, according to Christy Gonsalves, she apparently said, "Come on, we have a dog together." So, obviously it seems as though she was trying to fix something. Maybe something that was said, or maybe something that Kaylee did. It's very possible that Jack D was extremely upset about something that Kaylee said or something that she did. Maybe, Jack D found out about the guy that Kaylee was dating. The one that Christy Gonsalves talked about. And maybe Jack D, this was the first time he had heard about this, and he had just found out about this. It seems as though that might make him pretty angry. Kaylee, in my opinion, had moved on from Jack. They were together since they were young, and they were still young, but it seems as though Kaylee was moving on. Kaylee was moving on without Jack. She had probably outgrown him, maybe outgrown their relationship, and she was moving forward. And maybe Jack felt like he was getting left behind. This seems to be something that might upset Jack D quite a bit. When you think about the victims in the Idaho 4 crimes, and I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know about these victims, but when you think about these 4 victims, who was the one victim that had maybe upset someone in a real big way? It seems as though that would have been Kaylee. Her and Jack D had a very serious relationship, and Kaylee was ending that relationship. She was ending that relationship and moving on from this relationship. And I feel, and this is just my opinion, but I feel as though that could possibly have made her a target. Now, I'm not saying that Jack D committed these crimes. I'm just saying that out of these 4 victims, Kaylee is the one victim who it appears would have someone, around her that may have wanted to get back at her. Somebody who maybe had an axe to grind with her. She was ending a long-term relationship. Not only ending this long-term relationship, but she was cutting ties and moving on. And that can be a very, very dangerous situation for someone. So it's very possible that this altercation started on the 3rd level with Kaylee and Maddie. Maddie would have had Kaylee's back. And maybe this is where it all started, with an altercation. Maybe it's totally different than what we've been led to believe, which is that a total stranger snuck up to Maddie's room and snuck up on Kaylee and Maddie. So maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe it was someone who they knew, who was already in the house. Maybe it didn't seem odd for these people or this person to be upstairs on the third level because the roommates knew these people. It wouldn't seem strange if this was somebody who, was familiar with the house and had been in the house and knew these roommates. It wouldn't seem odd for them to go upstairs to talk to Kaylee and Maddie. And maybe it was something that was just that simple. Maybe it was someone who went upstairs to talk to Kaylee and Maddie, and things got out of control. Things went south real quick, and Maddie and Kaylee's lives were taken. Maybe it wasn't this, 28-year-old criminology student who had planned all of this and put it all together and, did all of this. Maybe it was something as simple as an altercation that began on the third level of this house and spun out of control. Kaylee's wounds were described as indicating that she had fought her attacker. Now, it's very possible that maybe Maddie also fought this attacker. We don't really know anything about Maddie's wounds. So it's very possible that Maddie had a lot of the same wounds that Kaylee had. Now, this would have made a lot of noise. If Maddie and Kaylee were fighting for their lives on the third level, it definitely would have caught the attention of the other roommates who were inside this house on the lower levels. So is it possible that maybe Ethan and Xana got involved because they realized what was going on? Maybe they didn't understand the severity of what had just happened upstairs. Maybe they thought it was just a big fight that was happening upstairs. And when whoever committed these crimes came downstairs, maybe that's when they were confronted by Ethan and Xana. Maybe after they were confronted by Ethan and Xana were overcome by this person or these people. And, we know that it was described as one hell of a battle going on down there by the coroner and by Steve Gonsalves. So is it possible that Ethan and Xana heard everything that was going on upstairs? Now, they may have not known that Kaylee and Maddie's lives were taken, but they definitely would have known that something very physical happened on that third level. And maybe that's why Ethan and Xana's lives were taken as well. Maybe Ethan and Xana had a false sense of security that they could confront whoever committed these crimes because they knew them. If this was a stranger or multiple strangers who committed these crimes, I think that these roommates would have fled the house. I feel like they would have run from this house while these crimes were going on the third level. Because I definitely believe that everyone in this house heard the commotion that was happening on the third level. So maybe it's very possible that Ethan and Xana felt comfortable confronting this individual because they knew them. More comfortable than if this was a stranger. Maybe they didn't seem as afraid of whoever committed these crimes because, for one, maybe they didn't know that this person had just taken Kaylee and Maddie's lives on the third level. Maybe they thought that it was just a fight that happened up there. And that's why they confronted these people. I've always believed that these crimes were committed by someone or multiple people who these roommates knew. You know, they got around the house and they moved freely around the house. They appeared to be familiar with this house and knew, their way around. So that doesn't sound like a stranger to me. That sounds like somebody who these roommates knew personally. If this was a stranger inside this house, I think that things would have gone a lot differently. If these roommates didn't have any idea who this person was inside their house, I think that we would be telling a different story. But it makes sense that these roommates would have known the person or people who committed these crimes. And as I said, maybe these roommates on the lower levels didn't realize that whoever committed these crimes actually took Kaylee and Maddie's lives. It's very possible that they thought that maybe there was just an altercation on the third level. And that's why nobody called 911. I've always wondered, why didn't, the 4 roommates who were on the first and second levels ever call 911? And it's a very strong possibility that the reason they didn't call 911 was because they knew this person or these people. And they didn't realize that Kaylee and Maddie's lives had been taken. It's not uncommon for fights to break out at college parties or, in those types of situations when people have been drinking, or maybe using other substances as well. So, if somebody heard a fight happening inside the house, they might not automatically call 911 because they know these people. So maybe they believe that, it's just that. It's just a fight. So why wouldn't this attacker go after Dylan and Bethany? It doesn't make sense that someone is going to be so angry or so vengeful that they're going to take 4 victims' lives, but then they're going to leave 2 possible witnesses inside this crime scene. That just really has never made sense to me. I've always felt that if this was, an act of vengeance over narcotics, I don't believe that anyone would have been left alive inside this house. I don't believe that anyone who would commit these types of crimes by themselves over narcotics would take the chance of leaving 2 witnesses. That just doesn't make sense. And what does make sense is the possibility that whoever committed these crimes also knew Dylan and Bethany, along with all the other roommates. It's very possible that if these crimes were committed by someone who knew all of these roommates, and maybe Dylan and Bethany didn't realize that their 4 other roommates' lives had been taken in these bedrooms, maybe they didn't call 911 And that gave this person or these people who committed these crimes, who Dylan and Bethany possibly knew, time to maybe clean up the crime scene, or maybe move things around, stage things. You know, it seems as though these roommates, Dylan and Bethany, would have been able to distinguish the sounds that were coming out of these bedrooms. But there is the possibility that they did not. You know, there is the possibility that they knew whoever committed these crimes, and they didn't want to be the people who got them in trouble or turned them in. You know, if they had a personal connection with this person, that would make a lot more sense as to why they never called 911. I've always said from the very beginning that there's really only two options as to why Bethany and Dylan never called 911. And that is that either neither one of them were at the house while these crimes were occurring, or they knew who committed these crimes. And in my opinion, those are really the only two explanations that these girls would have for not calling 911. So what do you think? Do you think that maybe whoever committed these crimes was able to move around this house so freely because they knew the roommates in this house? They were familiar with this house. Do you think that these crimes and that these victims' lives were taken by someone who they knew? Let me know in the comments. And if you like my video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. Stay tuned for my next video, and we'll see you next time.